Anyway, all I'm saying is I don't know if she actually did it. So thusly, I would still hit Casey Anthony.
I'm gonna let that one go uncommented on.
You're not gonna back me up?
Yeesh.
Bros back up bros on hoes.
Not on that one.
Well, she changed her name. She's got like a whole new persona. It's like when Kobe Bryant got
her name. What's her name now? Like Kobe got a new number.
Yeah, exactly. Like 8 was the rapist. 24, he just drains buckets and he's a family man.
Jesus.
Rest in power, Kobe.
That's right.
On your side. No bitch comes up to a hotel room at 3 o'clock in the morning looking to play Scrabble. Right?
It's true. I mean, generally speaking.
Parcheesi is a wonderful game of chance, but you don't want to play it at 3 o'clock in the morning.
With the world-renowned NBA athlete.
Yeah. One of the biggest names of the time.
Yeah.
Or ever.
Anywho.
Oh, you want to actually get to the point?
Yeah. I do.
I was just going to go down a diet.
Or this hole gets dug any deeper for the both of us.
Sexual iniquities. Anyway, so Dane, I was thinking for this week's meme destruction. Taylor, can I, one more time? Taylor Lorenz. You guys might know her. She's frequented the podcast once or twice here. She's raising hell again, saying that today is just as bad as hell and that the kids today are growing up in a futureless future. Are you ready to discuss that?
It's all freedom's fault.
God damn it. You know, if we didn't have that pesky freedom to be human again. And then the Culture Corner, Rage Against the Machine of War. How Americans are being radicalized. Well, yeah, I guess kind of to trudge on towards possible nuclear holocaust.
Yeah.
Why would
that doesn't sound like a fun time.
Why would we worry about that?
Doesn't sound like I want to play a part in that that next act.
Epstein didn't kill himself. Of course, DeSatan thinks that slavery didn't exist.
If all you do is get your talking points from the mainstream media, then that is what you will come away with.
That's exactly what he said, even though he didn't. Anyway, and then the main story, Marjorie Taylor Greene, nailed it, thinks she is secession positive.
Yeah, she has recently made some statements in favor of it, and we have thoughts. Well, let me rephrase that. The blue checks on Twitter have thoughts. We have thoughts on their thoughts.
And we're thinking about our thoughts as we
think them
right now.
So, come join us on the other side of the jump in and think about our thoughts with us on episode 136. Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction, episode 136, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/136. You can get the podcast audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. You can find the videos on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey. This one will be up in its full glory on YouTube. No blanked out segments on episode 136. So feel free to stick around here, YouTube subscribers. But while you're here, pause for a second, go over to Rumble, go over to Odyssey, give us a like and subscribe there. That way you can get the full episodes whenever YouTube decides to nuke us. You can also link up with us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can get into the private members-only Facebook page at $5 a month of support over on the website. Click the Support Our Work tab to check out how to do that. Click the link in the description under these videos where you will be able to go to our merch store. I think it's the first link below. You can get shirts, you can get mugs, you can get shower curtains, you can get a lot of cool shit down there. But it all helps the show. And then you can also link with us on, I think the other word I was leaving out was Float and Tribal. Always the afterthought, that Float and Tribal.
Well, it's Tribell. You continue to mispronounce it.
Yeah, I know.
Pisses me off every time.
So anyway, other than destroying memes, pissing off David is my favorite pastime. So since I've got a full quota,
exceedingly good at it.
Since I got a full quota on the ladder, shall we get to the former?
Let's get to the former of the ladder of the to be had forthwith.
Let's get to some meme destroying. So on this week's segment of the meme to destroy, we have a tweet from friend of the show, frequent guest, Taylor Lorenz.
Big fan, big fan.
For those of you who don't recall who Taylor Lorenz is and when she was on the show, bad for you for not knowing about the show because you should have listened to every single episode up to 136 by now.
Shame.
But good for you for not knowing who the hell she is because
it means you don't
your life is probably slightly better.
Right.
Anyway, Taylor Lorenz, in addition to being a blue check over on Twitter, is the journalist. I don't remember who she writes.
By the way, does that mean that you're a validated human?
Yeah.
Like you're an actual human? Not one of those little...
Especially since she got one before the, Elon, anybody can pay to get it thing. So she's like super a fish.
That's I'm going on.
I forget who she writes for us. It was one of those Washington Times, Washington Post, Washington, whatever. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Don't read it unless you want to lose brain cells. Anyway, you can't just escape her by not reading her posts if you see her on Twitter because sometimes she tweets shit like this. She said, quote, "People are like, why are kids so depressed? It must be their phones. But never mention the fact that we're living in a late-stage capitalist hellscape during an ongoing deadly pandemic with record wealth inequality, zero social safety net and job security, as climate change cooks the world." I don't know what version of reality Taylor Lorenz is living in, but that's not anyone that resembles the reality that the rest of us are living in. Well, I mean, there's plenty of Taylor Lorenz's out there, plenty of people that would agree with that tweet. I just don't know what fucking planet they're living on. David? Did she burn your last two brain cells and now you
I was still trying to comprehend
don't have to rub together to get a response out?
I feel like granted, I'm not size shaming her. I'm not shaming her in any other way, but I feel like Taylor Lorenz doesn't sweat most days.
Probably not.
I'm going to assume she's never missed a meal due to the fact that she couldn't afford it. And I'm going to assume that she doesn't have to mine cobalt day in, day out with her offspring strapped to her back, inhaling the same fucking radioactive chemical bullshit into her chest that's going to give her cancer not tomorrow, not the next day, but the day after. I'm pretty sure she's never done that, although she's more than willing to use the device that those people did to create the chip to put into the phone that she didn't take 2 fucking seconds to think her thought out before she just shit it out into the rest of the world with no concept, with no social deconstruction, with no way back from the hellscape that she's talking about.
I would say, that's a pretty safe bet.
Fair. Okay, let's go.
Let's break this tweet down and we're going to get through it a little bit quicker. I mean, we could do an entire episode on this, but we're just going to go through this one pretty quickly.
Where does she live in Washington?
I don't know if she lives there. I'm sure that's
an adjunct.
That's exactly who she writes for. I don't know where she lives. So. But would I be at all surprised to find out that she lives in either like New York, LA, or Washington? No, not even close. Anyway, so as we talk here, there's going to be a couple data points that are going to roundly prove David and I correct on this. I mean, as if you needed, graphics to give you the visual confirmation of what we're saying is accurate, vis-a-vis Taylor Lorenz being a complete moron. But Nameless Faceless Video Guy is going to put them up right here so you, the viewer, can enjoy. And let's start first with this late-stage capitalism thing. Late-stage capitalism is kind of like the word neoliberal. It's when people say it, they intend to sound really informed and educated, and they really know what's going on because they've identified the problems with the world, and they're the real, intellectual movers and shakers towards figuring out, why this world sucks. But they are completely meaningless phrases, meaningless descriptors that don't describe anything and are just meant to be like catchy little buzzwords to signal to their in crowd that, hey, I'm a friendly face. Listen to what I have to say for the rest of the drivel that I have for the characters.
Well, you're missing a point here. There's a connotative value to it, too. Because don't forget, right after she says it, she puts a bunch of bullshit behind it that she wants you to think is negative. There's really bad for everybody. So the next time that they get in a conversation, they don't have to call you always Trumper or a MAGA hat wearer or anything else. These guys are really good at names. Yeah. Really good at name calling.
They are.
Well, I mean, within their own tribe.
So late stage capitalism for the uninitiated. And again, if you have no idea what this is, good on you because you haven't been paying attention to people like Taylor Lorenz. Late stage capitalism is kind of like a piggybacking on Marxism, right? His theory that capitalism will eventually die under its own weight. It'll get so big and lethargic and starve out so many people that the world will be terrible, and then the socialist revolution will happen, and then we'll all march into our communist utopia and everybody will be happy. You'll own nothing and you'll be happy.
And eat bug burgers.
Trademark. Anyway, it's complete and utter bullshit. And so that's why the phrase has no meaning at all. But the late stage capitalist hellscape during an ongoing deadly pandemic with record wealth inequality. First of all, about that late stage capitalist hellscape, let's just put a couple data points out there. As you can see beside me, we have a collection of charts put together by Our World Data that shows the trajectory of extreme poverty, basic education, literacy, democracy, vaccination rates, and child mortality over the last couple centuries, which is basically the rough time frame that coincides with the advent of capitalism, because the ideas of self-ownership, which extends to keeping the fruit of your labor, which includes investing in capital, which includes all of the freedom and voluntary exchange that makes up the capitalist system. That really is a relatively novel and new concept within the human experience, coming out of Enlightenment ideas at the end of the 1700s and to the early 1800s. So looking at the last 200 years roughly of the human experience is rather telling about what the world is like under capitalism. As you can see in the graphic here, we have extreme poverty absolutely fallen off of a fucking cliff. We have basic education skyrocketing. We have literacy skyrocketing. We have democracy and vaccination rates, which, have your own misgivings about those things. David and I have talked extensively about those, but those are through the roof. And we would imagine that someone like Taylor Lorenz, especially since she referenced the pandemic, she should be stoked that in the last 200 years, vaccination rates have exploded and democracy has exploded. And then the last one, child mortality, much like extreme poverty, is falling off a cliff. And so I just posit to you, dear listener or viewer, imagine a world completely flipped around. Imagine freedom and voluntary exchange, capitalism had existed for 2,000 years. And then all of a sudden, socialism radically came on the scene about 200 years ago, and these results occurred. Would we ever hear the end of it? Would Taylor Lorenz ever stop shouting from the rooftops about the wisdom of our wise socialist overlords? And don't you see, extreme poverty is falling through the floor, and basic education and literacy is skyrocketing. But the opposite's true. All of those great things in humanity and in the human experience have happened to coincide with the rise of capitalism. Now, maybe that's a coincidence, maybe not. But it certainly isn't a capitalist hellscape, a late-stage capitalist hellscape, as Taylor Lorenz suggests. So allow these 6 charts to just be the opening salvo for you, the listener and viewer, to understand that Taylor Lorenz and all the people that talk like this are completely full of shit.
Well, the thing is that usually when you have a really good idea, you don't have to convince people of it. You don't have to keep changing the narrative. Well, it's just because it hasn't been perfected yet. It's like, okay, How long has communism or socialism existed? For before our lifetimes. Quite substantially before our lifetimes, so I could say that. And again, it's been implemented in a multitude of different countries. I don't have them all on a list and a topographical, geographical, graphic. But what I can tell you is that we have communistic countries today that all of these people that think that it's such a great thing can buy a plane ticket to those countries and see how great communism really is. And what a society and what a strong foundation for a country it builds. Right now. You don't have to go to a history book and take words and literature at its base value. No. Go experience it. Go over there and live there for 2 years. 2 years. Then when you do that and you come back and you're still espousing that communism is the best thing ever, then I'll take you up on it, Taylor. But until then, until you go and live in one of those societies, until you really reflect upon what the fuck you just vomit out of your mouth onto your thumbs and into the ether of Twitter, the Twitter sphere, take a second, make a difference, and really think, number one, do people want to hear me talk? Probably not. Number two, really more importantly, is the thought that I'm putting out there worth people reading? And if it's anything like that, no. Because what do? You just present a problem. What was the solution? Was it communism? Was I supposed to infer that communism was the right thing to do there?
At least social, at least democratic.
At least democratic socialism.
Which again,
define that for me.
the data part says democracy's having a good time under capitalism. So, you got half of your democratic
It's fucking
socialism.
weird how that's working, huh? But because it's working so well, we got to change it.
Yeah.
We don't want to get caught behind the power curve. So next time, one of you blue hairs or one of you left leaners or one of you liberals or whatever the fuck you want to call yourselves have a fucking complaint, do something that's completely out of the ordinary for you and offer a solution for once. Don't just tell me that life sucks because everything sucks and why doesn't everything suck and all we have to do is vote D or blue or whatever, no matter who, and that'll solve all of our problems. No. Think deeper about it. And if you can't think deeper about it, shut the fuck up and I don't want to read your tweet.
That's what I'm here for, to make you read it and get brain cancer with me. One more data point.
Supposedly, she's a symptom of the disease, not...
Of course, but, if she was an individual cancer cell, she is a primary metastasizer. She is...
Well, she is the first one.
She
pulled a flag.
She is pushing it out to the rest of the body far more vigorously than most cancer cells.
Well, that's fair.
Just saying.
I can say that.
One more data point from Nameless Faceless Guy right over here. We have the world GDP over the last 2 millennia. And as you can see, holy shit. So this one dates all the way back to the year 1. And as you can see, humanity was relatively stagnant for about
You got an axe in your forehead, you shit in a hole.
95% of this. So let's just retread back to Taylor Lorenz's tweet.
Most of us would vomit at the sight of a nude woman.
Where she says, record wealth inequality and zero social safety net and job security. Well, let's just take a look at that world GDP over the last 2 millennia and say, Taylor, how much do you think wealth inequality mattered in, say, let's just pick a random point here in this last 2,000 years, in the year 1500, when humanity had about as much GDP as it did 1,500 years before that?
Feudal.
You think there's a whole lot of difference? You think it matters a whole lot when the global GDP of humanity is stagnant and not going anywhere? Yeah, everybody's equally fucking poor. We're the richest kings of Europe, have to pay some servant to take their waste outside.
What's the life expectancy?
And dump it out the window. I don't know, but I want to keep it just to...
That's all I'm saying. Like, you live to the ripe old age of 30.
So this idea of losing your mind over wealth inequality, yeah, when the chart goes nuclear, So yeah, some people are going to get at the top of that chart, and a lot of us aren't. But I bet you, Taylor, would take your cushy life with your probably 80 to 100,000 a year salary and your nice phone filled with cobalt, as David said, over, even being a king of Europe in the 1500s. And this last one, zero social safety net and job security. Again, Taylor, look at the world GDP chart. How much safety net and job security do you think you had in the year 1000, the year 1500, when poverty was the norm, right? But your no social safety net, no job security is looking pretty damn nice these days.
Point though.
Looking pretty good, pretty nice these days. Why? Because of the explosiveness and wealth that happened shortly after the advent of capitalism. So rather than being a hellscape, Taylor, I suggest you take a look at the world around you, ask some more inquisitive questions than, oh, I don't know, I think Marx had it all right, and I'm just going to apply that to everything I see, despite the fact that my eyeballs disconfirm what I think every single day. And as David said, either shut the fuck up or educate yourself before you speak.
You know what? And it's just so telling, because everything that you just said, if you lost everything today and could not find a job at a cushy office space or an insurance firm or whatever, you know what you could always do, Dane? You can always get hired on at a farm to pick strawberries or blueberries, much like the illegal immigrants do today that have no job security, that have no education,
don't speak the language,
can't even speak the language,
have no connections,
but don't mind working from dusk until dawn, or vice versa, dawn till dusk, doing the most arbitrary thing, but doing it as fast as they possibly can all day long. Doing that. But no. Taylor's so white privileged, or whatever privileged, let's just call it millennial privileged at this point, that she's never even known manual labor, that she doesn't even view it as a job. Wow.
Or, I mean, to use David's example, that agricultural example was the existence of about 99.9% of humanity for its entire existence until the last 200 years.
That was my point.
People were barely living at subsistence until kaboom. And now very many people are typing words on a screen and pretending that they're smart and making $100,000 a year doing it. I'd say you got it pretty good, Taylor.
But you got
it pretty good.
At least they got to order McDonald's for the whole family on the way home from work that day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. In feudal Europe.
Right.
When they're slaving through a field all day long, right? And then they got home, they cozied up next to their AC that was keeping them warm at night because it's frigid temperatures out there. And all of their 7 children ate that night, and not one of them died because of cold exposure. And your wife didn't die giving birth to the last one, which is why you don't have 8. She understands all those complex things.
And, again, last point, I kind of alluded to with the first one, but it really, really drives the point home with this world GDP data, is just imagine the roles were reversed. Imagine that in year 1, when Jesus was walking the earth, that we had freedom and caffeine voluntarily.
It's a bull market, I'm telling you. You got to invest in
exchange, and people own the fruits of their labor and could build on it and grow their personal wealth, and capitalism. And then socialism only came into being in the last 200 years, and the chart looked like that. You think we'd ever hear the end of that? We'd never do. But yet, the thing that's actually responsible for that apparently produces a hellscape, according to Taylor Lorenz. It really is a completely just batshit crazy worldview that these people have. But,
But again,
we're trying to win them over one at a time.
All they have to do to educate themselves is just relieve themselves of everything that this hellscape is attached to. Let go of your phone. Let go of your cushy little apartment. Let go of your car. Let go of this. Go live out in the wilderness. That's still an option. You can still go off the grid. You can still move over to communist, whatever fucking country you want. not against the laws, but you won't do it. But you'll stay here and keep complaining. But with all that being said, Dane, Culture Corner. Rage against the war machine.
That's right. Let's do it. So, a couple of weeks.
Killing in the name of about it. I had
now that the rage against the machine now rages in favor of the machine, but it's just clever play on words of why this rally was rage against the war machine. So, a couple weeks back, there was a rally organized chiefly by libertarians in the Libertarian Party, but non-libertarians attended the event. Some hardcore takey communists, some pro-Russian sympathizers, some I didn't see this many flags or anything like this, but I'm sure some probably like alt-right sort of characters. It was really a hodgepodge of people, but the centralizing theme of the rally and what it was for, is as the name suggests, Rage Against the War Machine, was to try to pressure the American public to then in turn pressure their elected representatives to step back from the brink a little bit in terms of pushing their own regime into war with the Russian regime and starting World War III, and as David and I have talked about, potential nuclear holocaust and all that kind of stuff. And
for conspiracy theory.
And for that crazy, terrible thought process that maybe we shouldn't engage in a potential nuclear war with the most nuclear armed country on the planet, which is Russia, as the United States being the second most highly armed nuclear.
So they think.
For that crazy idea, these people were painted as political outcasts, probably nuts, stupid, don't got to listen to them. They're just Russian Putin sympathizers, blah, 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 blah. It was all the same talking points from Rachel Maddow and the rest of the mainstream media. And doesn't that just tell you exactly the culture that we live in? That the U.S. war regime that wants to always go to war and controls all the talking points for the mainstream media will always push in that direction. And if you have the temerity, the unmitigated gall, the audacity to pretend that maybe that's not a good idea, well, you're probably either stupid, evil, a terrorist, or insert other bad thing here and need to be driven completely out of society.
The lion, the witch, and the audacity of this bitch. Like, it's such an old play. Like, if I can take you to American football, shall we say? If they called the same play for every situation on offense,
they'd be Marty Schottenheimer.
How'd he do?
Not well.
He ever win a Super Bowl?
No.
He ever even win a conference championship?
No.
Mm-hmm. He got to one. Didn't win it though.
Yep.
So if you called the same play each and every time in most aspects of life, guess what? Life will figure you out. It'll sort you out, and you'll have to come up with another game plan. Unless you're the government.
Yeah.
Because
you always fail upwards.
The move is always, we're coming out with what we want to do, and we're going to put out an EPA with the fourth arm of the government, and they're going to tell the people what to think. And the people that are free thinkers that don't believe us and our plan, they are crazy people. They are outside. They are conspiracy theorists because they hold us accountable for the things that we said yesterday and the day before that and the day before that. So all we have to do is delegitimize. There we go.
That's the one.
Got on the second one. Not the first one, but the second one. All we have to do is make them look like crazies. And they're the crazy ones, not us that are on the right side, right?
Yeah.
Come on with me.
The right side is the one literally calling for nuclear winter.
That will erase humanity from this planet.
Yeah, and most other carbon-based life.
By the way, wouldn't that ruin the ozone layer, Dane?
It might have an impact on the
Green
climate.
Deal. Holy shit. kind of like what we discussed last week or the week before last, where we were saying, we need to give up fossil fuels. We need to give up eating burgers because cows fart. But we're just going to burn these petrochemicals over here. Don't mind us about it. Oh, don't ask where it came from either, because it definitely wasn't our fault, but it totally was. But anyway, Green New Deal.
Yeah.
Icebergs are melting. Polar bears.
So here's the thing. Ton of ink was spilt with the media over the last couple weeks since this rally in DC, protesting the ratcheting up of tensions with Russia, among other, war regime, ongoing wars that the United States is currently involved in. And so we're not in
any wars, Dane.
We're not going to dignify any of those other media articles or anything with any publication on this platform. So if you check the show notes page, you check the links down below this video, we're just going to link you straight to the webpage for the Rage Against the War Machine rally. So you can see who the speakers were, who the sponsors were, what it was about, what was said, and just make up your own mind as to whether these people are crazy or whether they're on to something. Because it may have flown under the radar because the media didn't want to even report that Americans were coming together from a very, very different ideologies and walks of life to coalesce around the one issue of maybe not blow ourselves into oblivion. So they didn't even want to report on it. And when they reluctantly did, it was always just pure derision. So I'm not going to blame you if you haven't heard of it, but check out that website below and, look for other events like that in the future if you want to throw your hat in the ring towards telling the war machine to sit down, shut the fuck up, and maybe not try to nuke us all and get labeled crazy for it. Whatever. So moving on to the Epstein segment, we have some more Desantis kerfuffles. This guy finds himself
Dane
in the media.
He clearly doesn't give.
What did he do this time?
Talk about us.
What did he do this time?
He says black people don't exist.
He did. He said that.
He said it, Dane. He had a bill that says black people don't exist, that history doesn't exist, and that slavery wasn't even a thing because, as we all know, black people don't exist.
Oh, I see the circular logic in that.
Right.
Yeah.
You see that? And if I was, I don't know, on CNN or MSNBC, they'd be like, you know what? It's a very intelligent thought. He did say that. He did say that.
Oh, yeah. They're not saying that his thought saying that is intelligent, but somebody pointing out and getting mad about it, right?
That he wrote a bill that said black people don't exist.
Right.
And they would never refute it because...
Yeah, they'd be like, of course he said that because, of course.
He threatens our very existence within our social norms. And he's Hitler. He's Hitler. He's going to round up all the black people and he's going to put them in chains again.
Well, dear listener and viewer, if you have not broken through that 47 layers of satire we just laid down on that deal, DeSantis stays in the news because, again, much like Trump, these people, and I mean the ones in the mainstream media, just can't stay away from making this guy as likable as possible by just being so hyperbolic and over the top with everything they say about him. And this week, I'm not going to play the video, but I will link to it below. There's a tweet involving an interview between NBC News' Andrea Mitchell interviewing Kamala Harris. And
weird.
She asserts, right, that Ron DeSantis is censoring Florida schools to the extent that slavery will not be taught anymore, period, full stop, didn't exist, and nor its aftermaths. So as far as Andrea Mitchell is concerned, in the state of Florida, DeSantis has said kids will not learn anything whatsoever about the horrible institution of slavery and its aftermaths. If this is sounding familiar to you, this is the exact same thing that the media did with the Don't Say Gay bill. It didn't say at all what they said it said, And then they created a media storm for about a month and a half saying it said what it clearly.
And what happened after that? Did they repeal the bill?
Nope. I still hear people refer now people refer to it as the so-called don't say gay, because they can't exactly say that that's exactly what it says because they know their hand's been in the cookie jar, but they still want to put that tagline out there. So they say, oh yeah, Desantis and the so-called don't say gay.
A little connotative value to it.
Yeah, but it still stays in the American lexicon, and that's what they want to stick.
That's nice.
Yeah.
So let's just get this straight for our viewers at home. There's one of the biggest slave trades that's ever existed in the world to date, going on in Libya.
I don't know if it's one of the biggest, but it is ongoing out and wide in the
It's
open.
the biggest today.
Right.
Okay. So this side that's so against Libya or so against slavery that we definitely won't give aid to Libya.
Yeah.
We definitely won't give funds to Libya. And we certainly won't help them support themselves with this slave trade that's going on over there, right? Because we're so against slavery in this country and it's terrible and no one should have ever done it ever.
Well, forget stopping it. Let's talk about who started it. Now, I don't have direct quotes right at hand about what Andrea Mitchell had to say about when old wise Secretary of State Hillary Clinton orchestrated the invasion of Libya, the overthrow of Gaddafi that led to the situation where there is an actual real live open slave trade today in the country of Libya, right? But I know for a fact NBC News did nothing but cheerlead that. And I'm sure that Andrea Mitchell had nothing but great things to say for her Lord and Savior, Hillary Clinton. So forget about what the United States is doing about it now that they've created the situation that it exists. People like her and people like from the Culture Corner segment that will attack anybody that rages against the war machine always cheerlead that shit. So yeah, feign outrage over something that's not actually happening while you cheerlead the activities that actually create that thing happening.
I guess it all boils down to how do you really, at the end of the day, if you have two brain cells to rub together, how do you take these people seriously? How do you take them at their fucking word anymore? Like, if they haven't proven time and time again, I don't want to get on my soapbox. I'm the funny guy. Just want to crack jokes and make deep jokes, fart on camera. But I don't know how the fuck you take them more seriously than me, to be honest with you. I mean, I've spoke more truth on this podcast trying to work a dick joke into what I'm saying than most of these career politicians ever have.
And media mouthpieces. Yeah.
Sure, media mouthpieces. But again, let's not forget, she was talking to the vice president, Kamala Harris, who definitely didn't do any of the things.
She didn't push back on that claim, Kamala Harris did.
I don't know.
She just let her run with it as if it was absolutely established fact.
Of course, she thought she could go, I got this shit in improv. And if you want a little viewer inside tip, if you ever want to enjoy the next Kamala Harris interview, speech, whatever, just watch her eyes. Because what she'll do, she'll start off real confident. Well, I don't know what DeSantis knows, but slavery was real and it happened. And then all of a sudden she gets this like glazed over look like, oh fuck, I've gone off cue. I'm
out of line. They didn't give me any more than that.
I can pull it back. So slavery was slavery and it existed and it was black people and there were boats and there was a passage of time. And when they were on the passage of time, I think it was one of the names, wasn't it one of the names of the boats? Anyway, the passage of time brought them over here to chains, and then now they're not slaves because we told them they're not. And we definitely don't have things in place that make it impossible for them to get out of where they're at now because it threatens us a little bit. Anyway, what were we talking about? DeSantis is terrible. Right.
So You know, and the Epstein moment is really like where this all stems from. So again, the reason why we brought up the Don't Say Gay bill is just like this. The basis of what Andrea Mitchell's claim is over the last few weeks, DeSantis has pulled some state support away from AP Black history. And this is painted as DeSantis doesn't want Black history taught in the state of Florida. Now, I don't know the specifics of the curriculum that he objected to or whatever. Again, you can probably find that anywhere and look it up for yourself. But I'll just give you what he said. So now you'll have what Andrea Mitchell says, you'll have what he says, and then you can go find the facts for yourself. What he said is, it's not the fact that it's Black history that I don't want these AP courses, not all courses, to not teach it. The AP ones is because the AP ones started or was using Black history to try to inject things like gender theory. In the AP Black history courses, they were starting to talk about, for whatever, in whatever capacity, gender theory and CRT and all of that different kind of stuff, which again, DeSantis has been going against for quite some time. But you can see, I hope, again, if he's telling the truth, maybe he's lying. You make that decision for yourself. But I hope that you can see that saying, well, I have a problem with these AP classes because they're not just teaching Black history. They're trying to use that as a Trojan horse to get in gender theory and these other radical things that have nothing to do whatsoever with Black history. And you can see that that's not exactly the same thing as saying that we're never going to talk about slavery in all schools at all levels or its aftermath. That's not the same thing, Andrea. So again, look into it for yourself, see what the courses were teaching, see what DeSantis objected to, and decide for yourself. Maybe Andrea was completely right and she totally didn't mischaracterize that at all. And again, the Epstein part of that is Andrea Mitchell, like the lapdog that she is doing what all good regime mouthpieces have done since propaganda and propaganda has existed, which is regurgitate the regime's talking points, which are usually based in divide and conquer, create issues where they don't exist to make sure that the powerful stay powerful by keeping the weak fighting amongst themselves. That's period, full stop, all it is. That's the government MO start to finish. And Andrea Mitchell is more than happy to play her part.
Well, and then the point is I know it's all mindless dribble, but within mindless dribble, you have to be held accountable too. If you're on screen, people get canceled for saying some off-colored shit when they're on screen. So during the video, if you can bother to watch it, God knows I barely could. Kamala says that no one should tell people what is best for the child to learn other than the teachers and the parents that know their children best. And we need to adhere to what the parents and the teachers that know them best and how we should teach them. I'm paraphrasing, but it sounded just as smart as me being stupid right there.
Surprising she's giving parents any credit.
Hold on.
Because they're always
But here's my
parents.
point. How many videos of enraged parents do we see at school boards going into, there's a book teaching my kindergartner how to suck cock. There's a teacher telling my child that it's okay to not feel okay and that maybe we should look into gender reassignment. And then there's other parents shouting down CRT saying, my son had to raise their hand as a racist because he doesn't have the right colored skin. I'm offended by that. And you know what we get from that? Is there a national outcry that, you know what, you're right, we overstepped, we need to pull back right now? No, there's none of that. They're still teaching CRT, which is why DeSantis wrote this fucking bill in the first place. Like, they don't correct, they don't adjust, they just shove it down our throats and say, accept it, or you're not one of us. But if there's enough of you're not one of us, then they'll change. But they'll only change after we all go, no, we're not doing this shit. I.e., mask mandates, other thing mandates that we won't mention on this podcast. You know, eventually when we just go, no, we're not doing it, they go, okay, we get it. Yeah. It's like, I don't know. They don't, again, going back to where we started this whole fucking episode from, how do you take them seriously anymore? I make fart jokes and dick jokes, and I make more sense as a drunken buffoon on this podcast weekly than they ever do up there on Capitol Hill, stone cold sober, we assume. I don't know, man. I'm throwing my hands up at the air. I don't know. I don't know.
I don't either. Well, speaking of shit that people don't know, other than, you know, regurgitated talking points when they're
drunk kombucha, by the way,
when they are countenanced with unpopular ideas. What we have this week on the main part of the segment is a couple weeks ago, Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted something which David and I can fully agree with and have repeatedly on this podcast. And I just got to say, like, why do these things always have to come with people that come from people that we don't want to like, right? It's never, somebody well, I should say, never people with the platform or being a sitting congresswoman or congressman, the way Marjorie Taylor Greene is, saying things like this that we're like, yeah, that person's awesome, and they're going to defend the idea. It's always somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene. But anyway, her and the rest of the chicanery she involves herself in, notwithstanding, this tweet is 100% on point. But the reaction to it tells you all you need to know about how much these people refuse to think for themselves. So the Greene tweet first, and then we'll get into some reactions to it. So Marjorie Taylor Greene created a massive outrage when she tweeted, quote, "We need a national divorce. We need to separate by red states and blue states and shrink the federal government. Everyone I talk to says this." And then her tweet talks about, shoving woke culture down our throats and Democrats' traitorous America last policies, et cetera, et cetera. But the key takeaway is national divorce, red states, blue states, shrink the federal government. This is generally a popular idea. I'm going to have to disagree with Greene in the assertion that everyone I talk to says this. Maybe everyone she talks to, but I really don't think that this is a popular idea. I think a vanishingly small percent of the American public like this idea for all of the reasons that we're going to get to in the responses to this tweet. But all of those reasons are wrong. And this is, to the name of this podcast, Weapons of Meme Destruction, one of the absolute most important memes to destroy. This idea that secession is inherently anti-American, how it's treasonous, that the Constitution disallows it, that the might makes right of the Civil War settled this question forever and always, that the United States, as it's currently constituted, is some magical geographic area divined by God himself, which shall never, ever be broken up in the history of ever, that secessionist movements don't happen across the world all throughout human history and go on a daily basis. Like, this idea that it's just unconscionable that somebody would think about a subset of a larger political unit saying, I don't think my interests are being represented. I want to break away to my own thing and rule my own life. That's a concept as old as time. And it is very, very American. And David and I are going to destroy the meme that it's not, and use some foils on Twitter to provide context for these examples.
Well, I'm a secession hesitant, shall we say? Can I come up with that? Term? I'd really prefer to work things out. I feel like divorce is the last stage when there is just no ground to recover. Stay together for the kids at the end of the day. We'll get them through high school. Once we get there, we might as well stay together, because who else is going to fuck us, right? So you got to just stay together. We'll just not look at each other. We won't talk. I'll watch my shows in my den. You do your things in your place. and we'll sleep in separate beds and we'll just stay married. And that's that. Well, that's what we've been doing for the last, 30 years plus? Like, we've been going down a road for a long time. We've been going down the road for a long time, and it got exacerbated. Everyone wants to blame Trump, but it really got bad around Obama. And it just seems like, if for nothing else in a relationship, you do have to fire a howitzer across somebody's bow for them to understand that you mean business. And I don't like secession. I don't like it. I know Dane said that we were both amicable with it. I believe in it. I don't want to do it. I think it's an ejection seat. I think we aren't saving this plane. It's going down, and this is the only way for us to survive right now. However, before I kick it back over to my wonderful co-host over here, beautiful Vanna White, I think that you need to be able to talk in this country again, and we've degraded so far that we can't talk to anybody anymore. Dane.
Well, if I fail in my mission by the end of this episode, so over the next 10 to 15 minutes, if I fail in my mission to convince David away from that position, that's okay, because this podcast should show you that people who have a general respect for each other can disagree on really important issues and still stay cordial and friendly and respectful, et cetera, et cetera. But that notwithstanding, I wouldn't be me if I didn't try to convince David anyway. So let's use some tweets from Blue Checkmark Twitter to be our sort of pedagogical tools to not only destroy the meme that secession is very American, but is also a laudable, good thing, a socially useful and beneficial thing, and is actually the most humane way of dealing with the current situation that we're in this country. Let's use some examples from Blue Checkmark drooling Twitter to kind of tease out some of these lessons. So the first one is from Liz Cheney, and she says, "Let's review some of the governing principles of America, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Our country is governed by the Constitution. You swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Secession is unconstitutional. No member of Congress should advocate secession, Marjorie." First of all, the meme floating right there in the middle, secession is unconstitutional.
Well, she should know better because she's a goddamn representative of this country.
She lost her seat because
she was. Well, maybe she should have lost it sooner, because what the fuck was she doing there representing us?
So anyway, the meme
not
is
knowing the Constitution.
Secession is unconstitutional.
Jesus Christ.
It's not. Not even close. Not only is secession not at all mentioned in the Constitution anywhere, Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, which deals with the restrictions on state power vis-a-vis the federal government, makes no mention whatsoever about a state not being allowed to leave the compact that the states formed when they created the federal government. So I'm sorry to tell you, Liz, your whole premise there is just wrong. But let's track back to that first part about let's review some of the governing principles of America. All right, Liz. Well, I think of the people, by the people, for the people is one of those alleged professed governing principles of America. The idea of a representative government, right? No taxation without representation, right? That's supposed to be a governing principle of America. Or what about the idea of a republic versus a democracy? A republic where the rights of the citizens are protected and held sacrosanct above and beyond the power of the government, versus a democracy where simply might makes right and your rights are constantly up for negotiation and debate. Those are some pretty foundational governing principles of America, but that's not at all what the federal government does. It's not of, by, and for the people. And one example of that is the fact that Congress has a constant approval rating under 10%, yet has a re-election rate over 90%. Does that seem to you, Liz, like the people's voice is really being heard in Washington, D.C.? Or what about the idea of a representative government, right? Let's just focus on one area of that. No taxation without representation. There are taxes passed all the time that you have no say in. We don't get a say in the establishment of the federal income tax, which before 1913 was unconstitutional. It might be constitutional via amendment now, but David and I didn't get a choice in that. You know, anybody alive today, except for the very, very old, weren't even alive when that happened. Well, so that's out the window. And then the idea that that this country is a republic anymore, I mean, it is, but it doesn't operate as such. It operates like a might makes right democracy, where as long as 51% get their way, the other 49% need to come to heel. So I would focus a little bit more on those governing principles, Liz, rather than being completely wrong about the foundational document on which you base your claims, because it says nothing at all about secession. So,
you know what, Dan?
Period, full stop, right there. Secession is not unconstitutional.
We need to give her a little benefit of the doubt. Okay? She's genetically predisposed to not know about the Constitution or give a fuck about it. Okay? She's Dick Cheney's daughter.
Right.
The guy that got us into a 20-year war so that his former employers could make a mass amount of profit, if for nothing else. And I'm sure there was more devious machinations involved. So why would she be... again, me being me, if my father was literally somebody that killed millions of people, I'd probably shut the fuck up for the rest of my life. Unless I had something really important to say. And guess what? Before I said it, I'd make sure it was ironclad. I'd make sure there wasn't any flaws in my argument or my stance. And on top of all of that, I'd probably still shut the fuck up. Because the people already voted. You're not in office anymore. I know you're still trying to make a career for yourself, but nobody wants to hear about the bastard child of the Antichrist that got us into a 20-year war that blew millions of people to smithereens on both sides that will never be accounted for profit. So,
well, her sins and the sins of her father notwithstanding, I hope, David, if we had a little tracker here, a David tracker, right? On the spectrum of David likes secession, David doesn't like secession. Have on the destruction of the meme that secession is unconstitutional. Have we moved David at all closer towards the side of the spectrum that secession is a good thing?
I didn't.
Or is he still neutral? There's more steps to go. So if you haven't moved, that's fine. I'm just trying to see where we need to move.
It takes more than
a little David head.
It takes more than just a little fucking tweet from a former representative.
Ignore who it came from. Focus on the meme. Secession is unconstitutional.
My whole point
being wrong.
My whole point being, I didn't say it was wrong. I never said it was wrong.
I'm not saying
I said it's legal, but it's a last ditch resort, and I'd like to exhaust every effort before we pull the agenda.
We know your position. What I'm saying is, did that do anything in terms of moving the little David head?
Literally nothing.
Okay. Next meme. We have the intellectual heavyweight.
If only we had a professional that can create a little image of David's head moving.
We're gonna see how creative he is.
Yeah, we'll see.
Moving on to the intellectual heavyweight that is David Hogg, and he says, quote, quite frankly, and this is a reply to Marjorie Taylor Greene or a quote tweet. He says, quite frankly, these remarks are unacceptable, un-American, and unbecoming of an elected official to us.
Sorry, how did we get started?
And unbecoming of an elected official to the House of Representatives. I think I sense that David head moving. This behavior has no place in America. Now I understand why my father and friends left the Republican Party. David has already jumped the gun and snatched that low-hanging fruit, right? The un-American and unbecoming of an elected official of the United States, and this behavior has no place in America, is so easily destroyed with the simple fact that this country was literally founded on American citizens shooting at agents of the state. Okay? Now, you can say Dane's just trying to get black-bagged again and he's calling for insurrection and whatever you want to say, but you can't deny the historical facts of where this country came from.
Terrorism.
David Hogg. The fact that your name is David is not lost on me, Mr. Hogg. Anyway.
You're making us look bad, you dickhead.
Anyway, so the fact that you think this is un-American is, again, doesn't even pass the laugh test when you consider how this country was founded. But let's go a little bit deeper because there's probably a lot of history that you didn't learn because your state propaganda that doesn't want to teach you the uncomfortable history that would lead you to the conclusion that secession is a good thing. David Bobblehead movie. Is not taught to you.
I dictate when it moves.
Is not
I dictate. I'm in control of my bobblehead, okay? I give consent for my bobblehead and its pronouns.
So let's do a couple historical examples. So after, because you might say, Mr. Hogg, you might say, well, okay, fine, the revolution, but the United States didn't exist yet. The Constitution didn't exist yet. So America didn't exist yet. All right, fine, grant you, whatever. I'll concede that argument for a second.
Strawest of arguments.
After the United States was created, one of the first secessionist movements in this country was not by the South in the Civil War. It was by, I want to say it was either Connecticut or Massachusetts. I think it was Connecticut, who threatened to leave the Union over conscription into the War of 1812. They did not agree with the federal government's decision to fight the British, and they didn't want to see Connecticut boys or Massachusetts, whichever it was.
I knew that the reason I didn't like Connecticut.
They didn't want to see their Connecticut boys being marched off to a war that they didn't agree with. They didn't find was in their best interest, and didn't find that it was in the interest of the young nation of America. And they threatened secession over it. How about let's fast forward to the late 1800s and Wisconsin's use of secessionist language and saying, we don't like the federal fugitive slave law, federal government. We don't want to have you use state resources to capture escaped slaves and then send them back to the South. We think that's wrong, and you're not going to use Wisconsin resources to do that. They threatened secession over it. Or what about the Virginia, I skipped over this, but this is a big one. The Virginia and Kentucky resolutions of 1788 and 1789, penned by none other than Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. And in those two resolutions, which were drafted over the Alien and Sedition Acts, were the principle of the compact theory of the Union, the idea that the states created the Union, created the federal government, not the other way around. They had their own sovereignty and they delegated a certain portion of that sovereignty to the federal government, but they always retain that sovereignty. If at any point the federal government is not serving their interests as a state, they can reclaim their sovereignty and eliminate the compact that they have to create the Union. These are fundamental, foundational, governmental, organizational aspects of American history. These are people, these are documents, these are ideas that come from the minds of the founding generation that created this country. And they have taught again and again and again that secession is an integral part of American history. And it's important because, as the Virginia and Kentucky resolution said, it is the last bulwark of freedom against federal tyranny. If you can't get the federal courts to agree with you that Congress is doing something wrong or the president's doing something wrong, if you can't get Congress to stop passing laws like the Alien and Sedition Acts or the indefinite detention of American citizens without due process, the Patriot Act, et cetera, if you can't get the president to stop acting like a tyrant, what do you have left? If all three branches of the federal government agree that fuck the Constitution and we're going to support each other screwing the American people, what do you have left besides the states defending their own citizens and saying, fuck this, we're leaving the Union? That's all you have. That's the principle of secession. And it was used throughout American history for things other than for the South to secede to protect slavery, to any extent that you believe that that is the exclusive cause of the Civil War. So again, David, Hogg and other person over there whose last name I'm not going to say, is secession un-American, unbecoming of an elected representative, and have no place in America? I hope in that brief trot across history, you've come to a resounding Yes, it's absolutely American. And we should praise it. David, where's the bobblehead? Go.
Bobblehead's right where it's always been. It's right in the middle.
Still not any closer?
Where it needs to be. But what I'm saying is that
get some movement.
No, but you did make me realize something. Is that it's again, if there's one common denominator with all the conflagrations, whatever you want to call it, there's always one key actor that's involved in everything, and it's always the federal government. It's always the government. Like, I can't tell you how many times a year a blue state vote D, no matter he, they, he, she, vote blue no matter who, New Yorker comes down to a state for 6 months and lives because their weather is better in a place that elected an official, i.e. to Satan, refer back to the Epstein quota, that runs a state, and guess what? They aren't drawn and quartered. They're not hung up by the nearest tree. They're accepted. They're Americans. I don't think the real fight here is with a state-to-state basis. I think the real fight here is between the states and the federal government.
Well, that's what secession is.
Well,
I don't
understand that,
I don't want to take my state and
but what I'm saying is, like, other states are going to look, well, you don't want to be a part of this? Like, why do you? It's like the thing that's tearing us all apart, the thing that's dividing us, the thing that lets Ohio burn because it's red, or a part of Ohio burn because it was red, not 4 years earlier said that, or the same entity that said that we are going to support this state because it voted red, or it just doesn't come out and say it. 4 years earlier, we're saying that Trump wasn't going to bail out Oregon because they had, or was it Portland? Portland or Oregon, right? He was going to bail them out because they wrote a bunch of fucking edicts under a fucking lockdown that eviscerated every amount of control that they had over the population, and it was running wild. He said, I'm not bailing them out. They're like, he's not bailing them out because they're blue. It's like, you guys don't care about helping anybody but yourselves or your particular platform at this point. Like, all you do is drive lines in between every amount of the population that you possibly can. You are the toxic girlfriend. You are the Meghan Markle that's pulling Harry, i.e. the United States, away from the royal family, which is unity. You are the toxic woman that is removing us from everything that keeps us who we are. And you don't give a fuck that you're doing it, just as long as you can make another payday tomorrow. And that's the real problem with this country. And that's where my little bobblehead will start moving to secession, because I don't think it's going to come to blows. I would hope this would be a peaceful secession, and all the states that leave it are going to show the national government that they can't play this game anymore. They can't keep using the population for its own machinations, for its own profiteering, and then never take responsibility for any of the malfeasance that comes from it. That's what I'm hoping for. So if my bobblehead were to move ever in any different direction, it'd be pro to show these stupid sons of bitches that we're all together. I think all 50 states should secede from the national government. I think they should do it right now. And I don't think...
I'd say the bobblehead's fully on the secession side.
I'm a Virgo. I'm either all for it or I'm all against it. So I'm saying, hey, 50 states will all secede from the union to show them we're not fucking around. Like this, you can't put a fucking dead man that is still capable of walking in the White House anymore. A dead man that has ties to other countries' foreign dictatorships being paid. His son was getting paid by the same country that is at war with Russia right now before he got elected to presidency. Like, and you just go, well, what can you do? It's like you can show them in one mass effect that we're not putting up with this shit anymore. You guys either got to fix your shit or we're leaving.
So now that I think that most of David's bobblehead is to the secession side, let me just make sure.
As long as we're all together.
We're
together against them.
Let me make sure I really drive the point home by demonstrating to David through 2 tweets that these people can't be reasoned with. And what is the only option you have left because David and I definitely agree on this point, I know for a fact, is that violence is not our option, is not our goal. We don't want this to go in the direction of violence. But as with the first Civil War, there's one side that wanted to leave and one side that wanted violence. It doesn't have to go that route. But if one side is hell-bent on violence no matter what, all you can do is walk away, hope that it doesn't come to violence, but defend yourself if you have to. So here's an example of that, and I'm going to take these 2 tweets together. This is from Marianne Williamson. I don't know if you remember her. She ran, I think, in 2016 in the Democratic primaries, and she said, quote, talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene, "Did she just call for civil war? Does she know what happened the last time a few states said they wanted to leave?" And then the other tweet that's going to be taken in conjunction from that is also repeat guest, friend of the show, Adam Kinzinger, sorry, it slips. It's Freudian at this point. He says, quote, to be clear, the Union prevailing in the Civil War settled this question. All caps, you have no right or ability to have a national divorce. This was settled. Your side lost. So, a couple things about that. First of all, to answer your very simple question, Marianne Williamson, no. Marjorie Taylor Greene's tweet did not call for a civil war. She specifically called for a national divorce. That is a legal separation of political units. That's what it is. Happens all the time. As a matter of fact, there's plenty of examples, some in the not too distant past, which were completely peaceful. I went over to Prague in the Czech Republic for Christmas this last year, and I learned something that I hadn't known about, even though this took place in my lifetime, about the peaceful secession national divorce between the Czech Republic and what is its neighbor state? I'll find it for you. I'll find it for you. And in 91 or 92, something like that. And they still celebrate it today because the two countries look at each other as brothers. There's no animosity there, but they realized that they wanted to govern their own affairs. They did not want to share one government where jealousies could arise and, they would fight over who's being representative more and all that kind of stuff. They just decided to split, go their separate ways, have their own separate governments, and they remain brotherly and friendly and kind to this very day. That can happen in the United States. There's no reason it needs to turn bloody, but the only reason why it will turn bloody, going on from Marianne Williamson back to Adam Kinzinger, is because of that attitude. That attitude from Kinzinger. And that attitude existed in 1860, and that attitude exists now. And it's from people, sometimes in government, and sometimes just agitators outside of it, like he is now, since he's no longer an elected official, that think that their way is always the right way, and it's their way or the highway. You can't disagree. We talked about this during the C-word times. Even though they got 90+% uptake from most of the population, they obsessed compulsively over that last 10%. These people exist like Kinzinger. They will not allow the peaceful route to happen. But that doesn't make trying to leave people like him wrong. It's not morally unjustified. As a matter of fact, it's the most humane thing to do to people like him is to walk away from them. And if he comes and wants a fight after that, that's on him.
Aren't these coming from?
It just is self-defense after that. But setting that aside for a second, this underlying concept of the Civil War settled this question is this concept of might makes right. And this is no shocker from people who hold democracy as sacrosanct because they think that 51% can command the other 49% what to do just because they got the numbers. Well, that's how we used to settle things before we became a civilized species. The bigger caveman with the bigger stick hit the other guy, took his woman, took his food, and that's how things went for millennia.
Nice.
And then human beings civilized and they realized, let's talk about our differences. And if at the end of talking we can't agree, then we're going to go our separate ways. That's what secession is. That's what national divorce is. There is no need for violence unless people like Kinzinger get their way. And there is no settling of might makes right in this aspect. If that's the case, Kinzinger, then I guess every rapist who gets away with it was justified because that settled that question. He was going to get what he wanted. So, this mentality exists, but don't let that mentality dissuade you from finding merit and the humanity in the idea of secession and national divorce, because it is the only peaceful solution to irreconcilable differences when you have people like Kinzinger running around that say it's my way or the highway. Those people don't want compromise. They won't talk to you. They won't share a space with you, not without subjugating you. And the only option is to walk away. And that's why David's bobblehead is now fully over here on the national divorce side.
Why not? Or pull it back to the middle. Anyway, no, I'm completely in Dane's camp on the Kissinger. I almost called him Kissinger. Kinzinger?
Kinzinger? Yeah.
Kinzinger? King. Okay. Anyway, all I'm going to say is that kind of mentality it's so rife with parody. So let's take where he's coming from. He's coming from the side that bases all of the things that they do in moral diplomacy. They have the higher ground because they're always thinking about the downtrodden, those that don't have, and we had to stand up for them. So they had the moral high ground, right? Until you don't agree with us on the smallest iota of anything that we espouse. And what's their first reaction? It's not to combat you with a better idea than you just confronted them with. It's always violence. So, from these peaceful, very violent people, we are hearing that if you leave us, we'll fucking kill you. Does that not go back to what we've been saying this entire time? If you listen to what they're actually saying, you can't listen to them ever again. Like, he's not an elected official anymore. People clearly thought he wasn't fit for the job, but he still thinks that he has any say over what happens in this country whatsoever, that he should be listened to at all. Don't listen to don't listen to Cheney, don't listen to Kuxinger, don't listen to any formerly stationed politicians, because guess what? They weren't good enough to keep the position. And I'd say 80% of the ones that are keeping the position are only keeping it because they tote the party line and don't give a fuck about you anyway. So, to move my bobblehead all the way back to secession for a fucking second, we need to show these guys we're not doing this shit anymore. Figure it out. I'm not going to drink Coca-Cola because you give it to me all the time on radio broadcasts, on YouTube broadcasts, on cable broadcasts. I'm not going to ask my doctor about fucking Ozempic tomorrow because you paid for fucking advertising. I'm not going to have you shove things down my throat and go, oh, well, we didn't see this coming, even though we suppressed all these studies that said this was exactly where it was going to happen. And no, I'm not talking about the C word. And no, I'm not talking about the jab. I'm talking about all the myriad of things that happened before this, that all those people up on Capitol Hill that were supposed to be protecting you in whatever given state that you elected them from failed miserably at their job. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that at all. But what I will say is if they don't care about you as an individual, if they don't care down to your human rights of health and what should and should not be allowed to be put into your body to make you sicker, to make you a commodity to them, by the way, to make more profit off of you. If this wouldn't be the biggest protest in this nation's history, I'm for that. I'm for the biggest protest. Say all 50 states, we go, no, dude, we're going to go our ways. We'll all agree with each other. And the only person that's going to be left out is you. Because we aren't going to listen to you anymore because all you're doing is making it worse for all 50 of us, plus the territories that we have.
I know.
General, you're sum it up for me.
Well, no, you're trying to have your cake and eat it too by saying all 50 states stay together but secede from the federal government. But that's the point, right?
But that is the point. We're not enemies because we remove ourselves from the government.
Well, we are. I mean, listen, I will promise you this: the people that live in Alabama and vice versa see the people that live in California as their enemies. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
That's what they've been told.
Well, no, not just what they've been told. They have radically different worldviews.
Right.
They will not see the world the same way.
One amounts to more than the other. And that's where the conflict.
Well, no, look at how. So people from blue states, when they hear this concept of national divorce, the first thing they bring up is, well, the blue states pay all the taxes to the federal government and the red states are getting all of that benefit. So the blue states are really subsidizing the red states. So this would never work because the red states are poor and yada, yada, yada.
The red states feed the blue
And what do the red states say? Right. The red states say, well, we grow all the food and blah, blah, blah. So the point is, like, just by starting the argument there, instead of trying to have a discussion about whether or not national divorce is a good idea, and whether it's morally justifiable and all of those other things that go into it, the first thing that both sides start doing is petty dick measuring about who's going to fare better when it happens. So that's what I'm telling you is those, if there were a situation where it became enough people that it was politically popular to start the discussions about the states themselves seceding from the federal government, then I can promise you this, that there will be secessions of states from other states. They will basically, regions will collectivize, like maybe some states like Texas and California that have large internal economies by themselves could become individual nation states. But for the most part, you're going to have like the states of New England form a little compact. The states of the Midwest form a little compact, or et cetera, et cetera. And what I'm saying is, no matter how much that happens, that's all to the good, better than what we have now.
Can I say this?
Yes, you can. And then I'm going to say the last thing about Czechoslovakia or the Czech Republic, and because I looked it up because I forgot the specifics of it, and then we'll be done.
Divide and conquer. Maybe that's what they want us to do. Because they know that we'll eventually denigrate down to county by county, city by city, population by population, which is so much easier to just move through and just conquer all of them again and say, we all on the same page? We're good. David, move out.
Despite the federal government's world police status over the last 30 plus years,
if you don't let us fuck this asshole.
You know what 50% on the boots of the boots on the ground in those wars of foreign adventurism come from? The individual state national guards.
Okay.
So this idea that the federal government
moves me back towards this because it's a loss of life versus this. So but go ahead.
So the idea that the federal government will maintain this sort of military dominant superiority to resubjugate the states is just
they don't have the backbone for it, but
right.
They do.
But I'm just saying
if they do.
Listen, I'm not saying that it's a guarantee that blood won't be shed because again, people like Kinzinger exist, and those people, psychopaths, are predominant in the positions of power that would make calls like that to basically force the states to stay. I'm not denying that blood might be shed. What I'm saying
blood will be shed.
What I'm saying is
not only
is that not guaranteed, it's not necessary. But more important than that, we should not let the fact that Kinzingers exist dissuade us from the objective truths about this whole thing, is that it is morally preferable. It is morally right. It is the most humane thing to do when you have groups of people that are so ideologically different that they see each other as nothing but existential threats to their own existence. The only place to go in that route to actually avoid violence, to decrease the chances of violence, is for them to go their separate ways. That's the only humane option that there is. And to say that just because Kinzingers are out there and would want to violently force them to stay does not take away from the moral legitimacy, the merit of that position, that national divorce, secession, whatever you want to call it, is justifiable on all those grounds.
The thing that I reserve my judgment on is that that's all based in, granted, very sustainable, very logical theory. Once you shut the lights out, all hell breaks loose. And we have to all adhere to a certain doctrine or it descends into chaos and we're so much more conquerable then. That's all I'm saying.
And I'm glad that you said that that's all on the round of theory, because that ties it up with the Czech Republic thing that I forgot, and which will be a nice little book into this, is it's not theory, because it's happened repeatedly throughout human history and within our lifetimes. So in addition, before I get to the Czech Republic thing, I'll just say that the vast majority of the breakup of the USSR was peaceful. There were a few violent revolutions of the overthrow of the communist regimes that were still in some of those satellite states of the USSR when the Iron Curtain fell. But for the most part, most of the states separated from the larger USSR on completely peaceful grounds. As a matter of fact, the country of Czechoslovakia, which came out of the fall of the Iron Curtain as one of those satellite states, separated from the USSR in the bloodless revolution called the Velvet Revolution of 1989. And it wasn't just 3 years later. And I'm so happy that this is the Czech Republic because of the personal family ties to this, and to show that not only is it not just theory, but it's actually legitimately in our blood, is, as I was saying, it's what's called the Velvet Divorce. On December 31st, 1992, the now country of Czech Republic and the now country of Slovakia, which at that time were combined into Czechoslovakia, seeing that they wanted to govern their own affairs separately from each other, but always looking at themselves, at each other as brothers, as friends, as cousins, as not enemies in any way, shape, or form, decided to bloodlessly and non-violently separate. That's why it's called the Velvet Divorce. They now have their own separate governments with their own separate capitals, laws, regulations. They still trade. They still are brotherly. There was no bloodshed. There's no animosity, none of that. And if that can happen in the middle of continental Europe, where there's all this milieu of different ethnicities and different, groups and religions and all that kind of stuff, all jumbled together, then in the nation of America, which has two massive oceans on both sides, much harder to invade than it is central continental Europe if an outside foreign power wants to subjugate a now weaker state that is separated, much less likely in the United States. And if the national conversation around national divorce in the United States can go in the direction of, listen, California, New York, Illinois, you think we're stupid and backwards. You think you have all of the right ideas. That's fine. Get all of the universal health care and all the social safety nets and all of the socialism and whatever you think is going to build your utopia. We're going to do what we think is best. We could still trade. We can still be brothers. We can still be friends. We don't need to fight over this, but you live your life and I'll live mine. It can happen. It has happened, and there's no reason to think that it can't or won't happen in the United States.
And my only rebuttal is when the breakdown of the USSR happened, what still remained?
Russia. But
And
Russia always existed as its own political
about
entity.
to nuke everything.
As a result of?
Because people don't just accept the fact that there's borders anymore. They have political leaning.
That point is true whether the United States exists as an entity or it doesn't.
I don't know. I don't know if it does.
But we've talked about on this podcast about the provocation of the Russian incursion into Ukraine.
I know that. I know that.
Again,
he says that it was because he's still indoctrinated in that USSR bullshit. He still wants it. So when you have a bad actor in politics,
or
it can throw everything off.
Or he has his own version of the United States Monroe Doctrine that says, hey, don't invade and engage in our sphere of influence or I'm going to defend my national borders.
Still a part of the stratum. And even though a sovereign nation was attacked by another sovereign nation, he said, don't do that. And yeah, we pushed him to it, but it might not be in our call. That's all I'm saying. It's like, we don't know what happens after you pull that lever. That's all I'm saying.
I know we don't know.
I moved a little closer to secession, but I'm not going full bore.
I know we don't know what happens, David, but that is the point that I'm trying to make, is that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Right. If we choose not to go in this direction, and we just choose to continue fighting this already low-intensity civil war that's going on. The point you made about Trump not wanting to give federal funds to Oregon and all that kind of stuff.
I didn't think that. That was the thing that they said.
Well, but what I'm saying is that's a perfect example. There is already a low-intensity civil war going on in this country. Yeah. It's just done with economics and money and all of that kind of stuff. Bullets have not been exchanged yet. But if we think that just because the United States hasn't broken up, that's the only thing stopping the violence from breaking out, that is very misguided, because the violence can break out at any time. I mean, it already does in small scales, people fighting on the streets, Antifa.
Those peaceful protests that we had during first part.
So the United States existing as a political entity is not what's stopping that yet. What's stopping that is largely the American public being heavily armed. And that you can't exactly go on a 330 million person scale if you want to start fighting, because who knows how many are armed, what their arsenal looks like, and where their loyalties lie.
So basically it boils down to Texas and Florida holding down their sovereignty.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Against the blue hairs.
But let's take lessons from the Czech Republic and Slovakia.
Please. Let's take lessons from peace. Let's just let other people live how they want to live. And let's not enforce our views onto other people. Because once you start doing that, I don't know, pronoun people, LGBTQ people, TRX, WX, YZ, RS, the sovereign nation of the United States telling everybody how they should live. Like, hey, let's just let people be people and live together in harmony. What a doctrine. But we live in reality, and we'll have to figure this shit out by either blood and bones or treaties and TDs. I don't know. I didn't know how to end that, Dane. But by God,
I don't know where David's bobblehead is on the chart.
It's slightly more
nameless, faceless video guy. Do your worst.
Follow my hand. If this is positive, if this is negative, and this is in the middle, meh. Just a little bit. It moved a little
progress.
Moved a little towards
progress. Okay? We'll get him one day. We'll get him one day.
Anyway,
so
Dane.
I'm just going to say, before we sign out, a couple suggested readings on these topics if you would like to learn more. 2 books from a guy you've heard me mention on this podcast before. Love a lot of the stuff he writes. He's a historian. His name is Tom Woods, and he has 2 books. One, this is a free ebook that you can get, and then it'll be the link in the description.
Woods, that piece of shit.
National Divorce, The Peaceful Solution to Irreconcilable Differences is an ebook that he published a couple years ago, which lays out the case for the case that I was trying to lay out to David, but he lays it out much better than I could. And then a regular book that you can get on Amazon, which is called Nullification, How to Resist Federal Tyranny in the 21st Century. And why nullification? We're talking about national divorce. Nullification is basically the precursor to full-blown secession or national divorce. It's the way for the states to push back and say, federal government on this policy. One key example would be marijuana legalization. Feds still have it illegal. Some states have legalized it. They say, feds, on this policy, we don't agree with you. Your laws are what they are, but we're going to go our own separate way. California, Colorado, etc. So anyway, that is a great book on that concept as well. So those are your suggested readings. Links to both of those books will be in the comments. And with that,
kneecap pie segment. So Dane, where can they find this podcast at?
Which segment was that?
That was what I was trying to do before. And then
those books were still part of the main topic.
Cut me off at the knees.
No, that was yours, right?
You cut me off, and I was like, "He's a piece of shit," and I'm going to secede from this fucking podcast.
There you go. He's all the way over. All right. This episode can be found at www.podcast.com/136. You can get the audio only on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. You can get the videos on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey. You can link up with us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, private members only Facebook page, Float Tribal to make David happy. And most importantly, make sure
you want me on that side, don't you? You need me on that side.
Most importantly, make sure you join that email list over at the website, wndpodcast.com. We will drop notes to you just like we did a couple weeks ago when we were on for our second appearance on the Whiskey Capitalist podcast. If you were on that email list, you got the email that morning saying, hey guys, we'll be on the podcast tonight. Come check out the live stream, yada, yada, yada. And it has all the nice little links to get to the live stream. I'm very helpful.
If you haven't checked them out, please go do.
Yes.
They're very entertaining, very good podcast.
But that's why you should join our email list so you can get notifications like that, find out where our little whack-a-mole head is popping up next. So with that being said, we will see you next week on episode 137.
And as always, my little memes, stay safe, but more importantly, stay free.